And then, of course, a practical section will be also adapted for you to be able to align the different data types and then research issues. And then the seventh, we shall look at designing valid and reliable research instruments or tools. Those are questionnaires. But you're going to find that as we are reading, we shall be able to also put aside the articles that have research items for the various we are studying, because we normally we improve, we adopt for already existing variables, you adopt research items. Or we refer to research items, some would say questionnaires, but they are items that would have used by earlier researchers to measure a certain construct. So you get the items, but you look through them, pick out suit the context under which your study is being done, and you eliminate those others that are not suitable for the context in which the study is being done. And then after the development, of course, that will be a chance for people to develop their research instruments and present them in class such that you're corrected there and then. And then that is why after designing, the designing of the instruments is followed by practical sessions where people will have to present their research tools. Those are the questionnaires. And then proposal writing. So here we shall be, maybe here proposal writing will just be even combining the different parts we would have done together, because we've already given you the structure of the proposal. So I know by the time we reach proposal writing, we must have done the major parts: background, writing of the background, and then writing of the literature, and then some parts in what? Methodology. So it will be more easier for you to complete research proposal at that stage. And then the person taking you through will also give you sample proposals for you to critique. Because we've supervised several students, we can share with you for you to critique, to see the weaknesses and the strengths of those proposals, and such that you don't repeat the same mistakes. And then the last will be APA formatting and citation. But different institutions use different referencing styles. Others, some may use Harvard, but for us, we use APA. And we always go with the current APA format. The current APA format will guide us on how to write our citations. Those are the in-text citations, or what you may call the sources for what you've written, and then the references on the end of the proposal. How do we write them? How do we draft the tables? Because I see most people submit their research, but when their tables are not in line with the current APA format guidelines. So a colleague will take you through that. And then, of course, first part 12 will be presentation and feedback. Maybe people who would have been through the will present them and will be given feedback. So you're going to find that the first 4 parts are going to be conducted by myself. I'll take you through the framework of scholarly writing. Then we go through the practical aspects. Practical, we conduct the academic writing, and then I have you present. We go through the research process, and then also the practical part of how to critically write and also read articles, critically writing, and then also reading articles. Because if you can't critically read, then you cannot critically write. And then from 5 to 8, that will be Professor Ntai. Professor Ntai will take you through research, design, methods, and methodology. Then the practical session on how to align data types and research issues. Then designing valid and reliable research instruments, talk tools, and then the practical sessions for design and presentation of research proposals. Then from 9 to 12, that would be Mr. Musambago will take you through proposal writing skills and guidelines. We already have these things with you. A critique of past proposals to identify strengths, weaknesses, and correction areas, APA format writing, and then feedback and presentation and feedback on practical sessions and presentation skills. Though for me, here I'll put more emphasis on people presenting their proposals. Those ones who would have developed drafts will have to present them. And then maybe afterwards, they can have them submitted. And then we have the assessment. But presentations are 40% of the seminar series training you're having, and then the proposal assessment takes 60%. So that means that the lecturers will be recording our attendance and also seeing how people engage in the presentations. So of course the mode of delivery, when they say case studies, we are looking at those proposals that you people will have to assess. Then group discussions, those will be your presentations, and then we have lectures. Those are the lectures we are going to have as we go through the entire semester. So once we finish all these 12 parts, then that will be the end of the semester. We do not have an end of semester exam. It is your proposal that will act. So the outcome for this semester will be a proposal. And I request that we all cooperate because we have a goal to achieve. We all want to complete our masters in record time. That is why we said research should be given a full year, because in the earlier years, students used to fail to complete because of research. So we want to find out where the problem could be this time. So that will be the end of the semester. If in case you have questions, you can raise them now. In case you have any comments, you can also bring them up before we proceed. Any comments or any expectations from us? Maybe I want to get to know your expectations. How do you expect? Yeah, I've already told you our expectations for you to complete your proposals by the end of the semester. Yes, Emmanuel?
Good evening, Professor, and good evening, class.
Good evening.
Thank you for that presentation. Being something new to most of us, we are going to have to step in slowly, and my expectations will be that we will have very supportive supervisors, of course, who will give us timely feedback in case of anything. Also, of course, on the fact that we have to also cooperate as students. But me, I would expect a very supportive supervisor in the entire process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Emmanuel. We are not going to be your supervisors unless when you allocate it to us. But we are here to guide. So, as usual, we have to go through the process of getting the supervisors. It doesn't mean that what you submit in Bugolobi will be the final topic you're going to study. You have to agree with what you're going to study with your supervisors. That is why, in fact, it is better that as we are doing this at the beginning, I request that you put in requests for supervisors, such that we move at the same pace. Because they'll give you different supervisors. I know some of you have already received supervisors. So first we shall guide you on what to do. But it doesn't mean that you drop your supervisors aside. You can only change a supervisor through FGRS if that supervisor is not giving you attention. So first we shall guide, but the rest of the things you do with your supervisor. But I know we are not going to be any different because all of us have gone through the same system and we know what is required when it comes to research. But it's your cooperation with the supervisor. At times, the type of supervisor you choose determines your completion. That first we may push, but I've seen supervisors who will even refuse to sign, even when the student is done with the work. So your cooperation, the way you relate with the supervisor, will also determine, and also the attitude of the supervisors. But for us, we shall do our part. Take you through on how to do each and everything. But now it is your supervisor to determine, because they have to append their signatures on those proposals before they are submitted to FGRS. But for us, we are committed. The entire team, Professor Anta is a committed person. Everyone is committed. And I know the work will be done. But like I've said, some of you will be given different supervisors. And then whatever you do, as we present in class, we also present your supervisors. You can only come to us if a supervisor has given you a comment that you don't understand. Because I've seen that with some of my colleagues and I've helped them out. That this is what the supervisor wants. And then he goes and does what the supervisor wants, and then the supervisor lets him go. So that is what happens. So you're going into an activity that one requires patience. Patience, because some you may look for your supervisors and you may fail to get them. But I'm not telling you, but it requires patience and hard work, persistence. Your choice matters when it comes to supervisors. That is the only thing I can say. Your choice matters to complete. If you get a supervisor who is never available, your completion time will be delayed. Even when we give the seminar series and try our best, we may delay to have the submissions. So you also have a part to play, but we also have a part to play to ensure that you get the research skills. Any other expectations? Yes, Manjeri.
Thank you so much, sir. My question is, at what point are we going to submit more concepts for us who haven't done so?
You can even submit now. The issue is, like I've said, what you submit in Bugolobi normally changes. It is not what you end up with. The supervisor may change. You can agree with your supervisor. The concept there just helps you get a supervisor. But when you reach doing the actual things, the supervisors may change, or you may also change. Because I've done this, students submit different things, but it's on the way, we change things. And then they end up graduating with a different research topic. Yes, Emmanuel? Mangel, you had a question?
Yeah, doctor, that was the first one. The second one regards item number 5, which has research design. I heard that our research is gonna be mainly, so I was just wondering that if we are going to do quantitative approach, why the need for qual?
Why the need?
Yeah, since you told us that for triangulated data, it's mainly used for PhD scholars.
Because you're not only studying to graduate. After your master's, you may be hired as a research expert. You may take on research projects, and that is why you need both knowledge for quant and qual. But for our master's here, we need the quant, and what, according to Makerere, the research type approved is Plan A research, that we don't expect somebody to do Plan B. Do you get the difference between Plan A and B? Plan A, you're doing Plan B, you do in one company. Plan A, you must do in more than, because the minimum you can have is 30 companies. So you do in more than 30 companies. It is completely Plan A, no Plan B this time. We shall guide you still. And even the supervisors have to know that the proposed masters your own requires Plan A and not Plan B research. So as you're doing, even the top, that means that you should have like something like 3 variables. Somebody is crying 3 variables, not 1. Because in Plan B you can have 1 variable. But in Plan A, you need 3, even in not 2. So that is where we are going. But I know this Plan A is even more easier to do. I know you can even complete faster. And you can easily pass compared to what? Plan B. Yes, Ocheng Peter.
Yes, thank you, Professor. Good evening, colleagues.
Good evening.
I heard that if it is Plan A, we need at least 3 variables.
Yes.
I took that in terms of like maybe predictors, then maybe.
I'm going to talk about that in the PowerPoint slides I'm going to present. You need one independent and 2 predictor variables.
Okay.
Meaning you need 2 independent variables and 1 dependent variable. And we shall explain. I'm going to go through. I'm taking the last comment from Daya, or if it's a question, and then we begin.
Thank you, Prof. Good evening, Prof, and good evening, colleagues.
Good evening.
For me, my expectations are to continue dancing on the tune set by my previous colleagues, the presenters. Timely feedback from our supervisors, which will do us more good. Then teaching us how we can access other articles that we can reference. Then, last of course, we don't want to be enemies in one way or the other. We want each and everyone to graduate, because that is the reason why everyone is coming back for the master program. I think each and everyone will contribute something to the development of this country. So I beg that we cooperate, we as students, and also the supervisors, they give us timely feedback. We contribute something to the country. After a master program, we can't remain the same. The change will not remain the same. My friend will not remain the same. Everyone will not remain the same. They will contribute a lot. So let us cooperate. I'll emphasize that cooperation, because I've seen very many talking about that, and it is the major reason. Feedback and cooperation. Feedback, cooperation. We don't want to see people quarreling, students quarreling, supervisors are even abusing us. I beg to submit back to you, Prof.
Thank you, there. So for me, I've given the tactic. You choose the people you can work with. If you want to complete, don't choose people who do not have time for you. Choose people who you know will be available. Because it is one of the aspects that affect the completion time, the completion rates for the students when it comes to research. That some supervisors take a lot of time to give feedback, but the choice is yours on who to choose. Yes, Frank.
You professor, I don't know if I'm loud and clear, but I'm thinking a noise place.
No, I'm not loud.
Okay, thank you. Now, with the issue of supervisors, how many supervisors are supposed to be attached on each individual? For example, I'm talking on the side of supervisor. Let's say if Professor Sheila, how many number of students are you supposed to have? Because in the reason why I'm asking that question is that you might find that everyone is looking at Professor Sheila, their trigger. So you find that maybe you're overwhelmed with the number of students, and maybe you select students that you feel like are comfortable. Yet everyone will be feeling more comfortable working with that kind of supervisor. So how many students are supposed to be attached on that job? Because I may choose a supervisor like Professor Sheila, and then Professor Sheila say like maybe the number is too much or something. So I wanted to be enlightened on that so that we don't mess up. So that we look out, because you may be like, I want Professor Sheila, and then by the time you select her, and then overall that she throws you out of down. So it's better to prepare as early as possible so that we don't get disappointed. Mostly me, I'm talking on my behalf. Thank you.
Okay. I can tell you that among them, it is Bogolobi people who choose supervisors. When you list 4, they choose for you 2. It is the FDRS. For me, in most cases, I come in to help. Like I've helped, I think there have been 2 students. One, the supervisor refused to sign her proposal. But when Professor Baje contacted me, I guided her. So after her proposal was examined, I had to take her on to the end. And then another one, I think the supervisor had left. So there are cases I come in for, but when there are problem-related cases. But it is FDRS to distribute the students. But for you, if you're saying you're not okay with the supervisor, even you can ask for a change and they give you someone. That is if you see that you're not moving. So it is just in certain situations that I may be given some students, but it's FDRS that will allocate you supervisors. So you submit, and then they will choose from the list that you have. So I go to Bulega, then Ruth, and then Isabidi, and then we proceed with the lecture.
Thank you so much, Prof. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, colleagues on the call. Prof, I want to first of all thank you for this matter. It's really a critical matter. We are so much lost, we don't know totally green. So on the same issue of choosing supervisors, yes, this one I'm going to ask, yes, I know you must have talked about it, but I need clarity that is clear. Write an email to FGSR, and then I list my supervisors I want, and they choose for me. I mean, I want a procedure and how And also I need guidance on when can I do it. Am I late, or we have a specific period which I'll be able to write those emails listing the supervisors, and they will be given to us. Some clarity, Prof, on when or whether we can start now. We write those emails, and also the procedure. We are totally agreeing, Prof.
I've been hearing from some colleagues, but what has been done before, that we had a form that we used to fill. I don't know whether it is what now on Professor Sweaty's regime that is what is being done, but I'm going to get in touch with them to ask them what exactly you need, but you need to begin right now. Don't waste any time. You need to begin immediately, such that you're able to complete in record time. Because just know that every extra month you go after 2 years, Makerere charges. So, but if you complete before the 2 years, and then if Makerere delays, if the delay is our side, then you're not supposed to pay an extra penny to Makerere. But if it's on your side, you will have to pay. And I heard Ruth. We need to move. Ruth?
Yes, thank you so much, Prof. Let me be so brief. Yes, still on the issue of the supervisors, yes, you encouraged us to select those we feel comfortable with. We feel they are approachable and they will have time for us. However, on the third note, you're given the chance, of course, to select 4. Actually, the form is there. We are talking about it. But then when you go, they're like, some scenarios happen and they're like, out of the 4, we are not giving you any. You don't know how it really feels. It hurts. You can even collapse from there. And they give you people you're not so comfortable with. People you really know that they are hard, they are unreachable, not approachable, and it is really so sad. Yeah, it is really so sad. I don't know how they can do about it. Of course, I know that sometimes they choose supervisors depending on your topic, but it is so bad that they give me an opportunity to select the 4, and then out of the 4, you don't give me any. Yeah, that's my concern, Prof.
I'm going to talk to them. At times, you may ask people who are already overloaded with students, but I'm going to take that concern to them. I'll talk to them and see what they say. I'm going to meet with Professor Slight, and then we shall discuss.
All right, Prof. Thank you so much.
Then I have Michael, and then Abulega last, and then we proceed. Michael?
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, colleagues, and good evening. I have 2 issues to ask. One is on regards to the supervisors. I tried to apply, but they told me you cannot apply for a supervisor until your concept note is approved. I wrote something, almost 1 page. The response I got, they said, "What is this?" So I don't know what I should write and who should guide me so that I can draft something, and then I proceed. Then 2, I was wondering, why is it that concept note or something, it goes, I don't know who approves it there, but they told me either one person or something. I thought there could be 2 or more supervisors or professors who can help in speeding up this. And then the other part the last one is, I work in a government entity. I happen to get one staff from OOPS there who is carrying out his research, and he kind of discouraged me and said, I think Makerere is by default that you can finish in 3 years, because he has also pushed and pushed. So I just told him, no, come, I give you the interview so that you can finish. So kindly, I hope this time it will change. Thank you.
I don't think still that one for the concepts. I'm going to inquire, but maybe I could look at how you wrote it, because even how you write could have been the cause. Because there is a way we want, if I want a concept, there is what I look for any research student. I want to know your dependent. I want to know your independence. I want to know the reason as to why you're choosing those variables. I want to get to know the problem, mainly the problem. What is the problem with that dependent? If it's performance, if you're studying supply chain performance, what is wrong with it? So I know those are things they are looking at. Then you'll have to share with me and I see. Then I'll guide you on what to write.
Okay, Prof, thank you.
Because they want to know the gap, what are independence, the dependent, the problem. And why are you interested in studying the dependent variable? You'll share, and then I'll guide you. And then you'll submit again. Then we have Bulega, last. You had a hand up.
Prof, you clarified what I wanted.
Okay. So if the concepts, whatever you're going to cover here, will even help you. By the time, even before we complete, maybe this week, you'll be able to have something. Because they want to know what you want to study. But what is your dependent? So in your concept, you have to specify the variables. And then if you're specifying that ABC may be information sharing, inventory management, and supply chain performance, then you have to show why you want to study, say, supply chain performance as your dependent variable. And then why could you be interested in studying the independents as influencers for the dependent? Which scholars suggest so, and then what is the gap? And there are studies that have been studied in relation to your dependent. Of course, you have to show that there are no studies that have been studied in relation with the dependent. And maybe you could tell them briefly about the design. Just a short 1 page, and then you give them. But you'll give me, and then I'll go through. And then we can discuss. Afterwards, you improve, and then you resubmit again. So I'm going to share the first PowerPoint slides, and then we begin.
Jacqueline, we are hearing you.
So I'm going to leave the slides at this. So we are beginning with the first topic, and I began right from the simplest things, because if I begin straight away with academic writing, I know people may get lost. So the first part is on what is social research, because what you're going to engage in belongs to the category of social what? Social research. And we see that with social research, you may be interested in investigating or understanding human behavior, why people behave the way they behave, relationships between things or variables and societies, using both qualitative and quantitative methods. But you're going to find that here, I've already said, for us, we are going to go quantitative, not qualitative. It will be quantitative. But the kind of research we are going to do belongs to the category of social research. We have others like operations research, etc. But ours is social research, where we may study human behavior, relationships, assess relationships between variables, and then also societies, using either the qualitative research design or the quantitative research design. And at the end of the day, our research is expected to inform policy. That is why I know that you're being told to derive variables from the parish development model. Why? Because they want to ensure, or they want to see how the research you people do informs what? Policy. In relation, policy-related decisions in the area of the parish development model. So that is where we are, that we are stationed under social research. And when you're studying social research, basically the research is framed using various variables. And I define what a variable is. That it is an entity that may take on different values over time, because we know that these variables keep on changing. Like if we look at human behavior may not be it may not be the same throughout. There are different factors that could lead a change in somebody's behavior. Say, for example, the level of education could influence. Others, the age influences. Others, maybe peers influence. So when you find that, we see that variables can, more so for the independent variables, can never be the same. They will keep on changing over time. So that is why we say that variables would refer to entities that take on different values across individuals, because these take place among individuals. So if you're studying supplier relationship management, even the individual aspects would contribute to the kind of relationship that may exist among maybe entities. So we find that there could be variations in relationships depending also on the individuals and the time as it passes. But maybe the attitude of the person towards a different kind of relationship could also determine what kind of relationship that may exist between, so for example, the suppliers and the buying company. So that is why we say a variable can take on different values across individuals and across time, because things change with time. And we know that in social research, we have to study several variables, because social research is framed using, or could be defined using, a number of variables. Then here, we look at the independent. Because we have independent variables, we have the dependent, we have the moderators, we have the mediators, and then we have the control variables are terms that people call the confounding variables. So with the independent variables, we're going to find that these are variables that are expected to cause a change in the dependent variable, or what they call the outcome variable or the criterion variable. That if you want to see a change in the dependent or criterion, or what we call the outcome, you manipulate your independent variables. And then you see how your dependent will change. That is why I gave an example of a plant here. Independent is seawater. And then this dependent, if there is no water supplied, then the plant will not grow. But we see that if there is proper supply of water, that means that the growth of the plants depends on the water that is provided to them. That you will see a change if there is continuous watering of these plants. And if they are not watered well, still a change will be observed. So you manipulate the independent to see how the dependent variable behaves. And then for the dependent, we said it could, at times the scholars refer to it as the criterion or the outcome variable, which depends on the changes on the independent variable. And here I'm giving an example of the performance of a student that could depend on the level of intelligence and the revision time given to the notes or to the subject. But if a student revises his or her work, and based on the level of intelligence of that student, then maybe the performance would be good. Meaning that the performance of the student could depend on the level of intelligence and the revision time provided for the given subject. Then we have the mediator variables, which at times they call the intervening variable. That for the independent variable to have an impact on the dependent, we need a mediator variable. You're going to find that at times there are certain, you may have an independent variable and a dependent, but when you collect data and run the analysis, they may not be correlated. But maybe if you understand that for the independent to affect the dependent, when there is a mediator variable, then that means that when you put that middle variable, you may find that there is a positive path from the independent to the mediator, which is M, and then from the mediator to the dependent. Meaning that this for X, which is the independent, to influence Y, you need M to be there in the middle. That it mediates the relationship between the two. And you may find that here at times the outcomes could be a full mediation or a partial mediation, depending on the data that is collected. That a full mediation, it means that a full mediation will exist when, in case if a mediator variable is introduced in the equation or in the model, the relationship between the independent and the dependent variable ceases. And then it's a partial mediation when, if we introduce a mediator variable in the equation or in the model, that the relationship between the independent and the dependent exists, but at the same time there is a positive mediation for the mediator variable in the relationship. So that would be a partial. And then for the moderator, it just interacts with the independent variable. That is why you're going to say when maybe the level of influence for this moderator variable is high, then the independent variable will have a higher influence on the dependent. So for it, it is called the interactive variable. But it interacts with the mediator variable, interacts with the independent variable, or for the independent variable to have an influence on the dependent variable. So any changes in the moderator, the changes will affect the influence of the independent on the dependent variable. So they are taken to be interactive variables. And then for the confounding, we are seeing that these are control variables which affect both the independent and the dependent. That if they are present and maybe their influences is tested for and the influence is positive, then we have to control for them. Normally, some people look at age, they look at level of education. If it's farms, they look at farm size. And then they could look at farm age to see whether they could have an influence on the relationship between the independent and the dependent variable. So here I have a diagram which shows how the moderator should be appearing. That with the mediator, this is the postman. That in the independent variables influence the mediator, and then the mediator will have an influence on the dependent variable. Let's say, for example, maybe for us, if we have, say, we could look at, a good example could be if we look at maybe the performance of the children in class. There's some, and then we have maybe the attitude of the child towards studying. Or we could have maybe here, the independent, we could have aspects of pocket money. Pocket money, grabbing the suitcase. And then in the middle, we could say that maybe this pocket money, if I give the child enough pocket money, that pocket money could have a direct influence on the child's academic performance. But could it happen? And then we could say at times we could give enough pocket money, but this child may not perform well in class. What could be the mediating factor? Maybe the attitude towards studying. That pocket money could maybe influence the child's attitude towards studying, and then the attitude could now result in good academic performance. Meaning that the attitude of the child towards studying being influenced by the grab and the pocket money given to the child could result in good academic performance. And then when you look at the moderator, maybe you look at the school environment. Maybe if we see that the grab given to the child, in addition to a good school environment where the teachers are friendly, they do care, that if they do interact, then we could get good academic performance. But what could happen that maybe here you give the grab, everything, scholastic materials to the child, but again, the environment at school is not favorable. Meaning the poorer the school environment, if the poor school environment interacts with the grabs, with the grab you get, but if this environment is poor, it will automatically affect the influence of the grab and the pocket money the influence that grab and the pocket money may have on the academic performance of the child. But this interacts with the dependent to influence this interacts with the independent variable to influence the dependent variable. So in our research, normally have these. There are students who may have two independent variables. Because we normally recommend a simple model. Why should you have a complex model? Are you doing a PhD? We normally recommend a simple model because your aim should be getting the basic research skills and then also completion of the master's on record time. So in most cases, some have mediators, but for me, I normally tell my students have two independent variables. Then the objectives, of course, it could be, say if we have two independent variables, like I said, information sharing, inventory management, those are two independent variables, and then customer satisfaction. So for example, in the downstream chain, being the dependent, then what could be the objectives? That I can have an objective on the relationship between information sharing and customer satisfaction. I can have an objective on the relationship between inventory management and customer satisfaction and the combined effect of the two. The combined effect of information sharing, inventory management on customer satisfaction. Very simple. But those who want to learn, they can go for mediation. But then you have to be able to analyze and interpret the mediation results. Others, instead of mediation, they could have moderation. But with moderation, it could be a little bit hard to have, because normally we require 3 research objectives, not 2. Minimum of 3 research objectives. But if you do moderation, we're going to have only have, say, the relationship between the independent and the dependent and the interactive, the moderation. The moderation role of the moderator variable in the relationship between the independent and the dependent. You only have 2 objectives, meaning your research cannot pass. But if you have the mediator, you could have the relationship between this and this, relationship between this and this, relationship between the mediator and this, and then the mediating objectives. But if you do the other way around, like the first ones I stated, that you have 3 independent, you have 2 independents and 1 dependent, but you have direct arrows that flow from one independent to the independent, and then from another independent to the dependent, and then the combined effect. That is very simple enough for you to go. But it's up to you to choose what you want. So those are the variables. So from here, you should be able to, 1, identify a context, and then identify an independent variable you want to study and get a research problem on that dependent. You identify a dependent variable because we normally work backwards. But you identify a dependent variable and you read backwards to identify the independent variables. So you should be knowing the context in which you want to do a research, and I've told you the different types of variables we need. That is why I said I'm not going to go straight to the academic, because you need this before you go to academic writing. So any questions on the variables? Any questions on the variables? Any questions on the variables? So are they clear that from here we are able to identify the independents and the dependents? Like what I know, what students do is that they get a dependent variable and then they just bump the independent variables. You have to show us how you arrive at your independent variables. That is why I said we work backwards. We identify the dependent, and then we go to the literature and read current, read on what has been done on that dependent variable we want to study. What are the areas of further research they've suggested? Reading current articles. So from the areas of further research, because they're normally in the article, down, you're able to identify the independent variables. Because normally scholars recommend that maybe future research should examine this in relation to this dependent variable. So that is how you get your independence. But you just don't think about them in your head and say that you put them on paper. Like I have seen how most of the students do. That when you read the background, even they do not show how they arrived at the independent variables. They do not show which scholars have recommended those variables to be maybe for which scholars have recommended that those variables be conducted by or be examined by future researchers. So that is why I began with that, such that as we move, we already identifying our variables, the context. From the context, we identify if it's supply chain. Then from there, we have to identify our dependent. Do I want to study supply chain resilience as a dependent? Am I interested in supply chain performance? What is the problem in Uganda here in relation to supply chain performance? Then once I get the problem, then I go to literature to identify my independent variables. But the problem has to be having a current source. If you can't get a current source, you engage you take a sample of 3 to 4 managers if you're studying, if your concept is done in terms, and I ask them on what could be wrong with the performance of their family's supply chain, and then they tell you, and then you document that, rather than writing or citing old sources. So those are the variables. So those are what we expect to see. Either you need 2 independents and 1 dependent. One of the dependents could be a mediator. But having 1 independent and a moderator is a bit risky, because when it comes to objectives, we only have 2 objectives. They will be limited. So that is why a mediator would be fine. But you can have a moderator and a mediator, but though it'd be going. Maybe if you can manage, you can do that. But if you say, for me, at the moment, let me first focus on this. Then you can have the simple ones, and then you move. Then, apart from the normal variables, you're going to find that some of these variables, if you go to SPSS, they could be categorized as nominal, others as ordinal. In most cases, the SPSS has numeric, ordinal, and nominal categories. So, but here, I know these are done in statistics, though when we come to research, we also have to look at them. So, under the categorical variables, you're going to find that they could either be discrete or qualitative variables. And we shall look at the discrete variables, which are also taken to be variables that could be measured using values, but which values could be in whole numbers that have maybe similar intervals between themselves. And then for these categorical variables, you're going to find that they can further be categorized under nominal, ordinal, and dichotomous. Because you're going to come across these things in SPSS. That we have nominal variables, which variables would either have 2 or more categories. They have 2 or more categories, but they do not have a particular order in which they could be arranged or flow. So we have marital status that you could arrange whether you're beginning from married, divorced, or what, it doesn't matter the arrangement. But you will find that they can be arranged in any order. They could be 2 or more. These variables could be having 2 or more categories. 2, say for example, gender has female and male, but the order doesn't matter. Marital status, like I've said, it could be somebody could be single, married, divorced, separated, etc. But we do not have a particular order in which we can arrange these variables. And these are common in research. People ask for marital status, they ask for level of education, even level of education. Though some tend to say diploma, bachelor's, but the order may not be mattering a lot. And then we have dichotomous, which can only be. These are variables that could only be having 2 categories or levels, and mainly here we have the gender, where you have female and male. We only have 2 categories, meaning that variable, the gender variable, is dichotomous. And then we have the ordinal, whereby the variables could be ranked in the categories have to be ranked in a given order. Like here, we give most of the variables we study, we normally use the Likert scale. So we say strongly agree, disagree, or neutral, and then strongly disagree, neutral, strongly agree, and then strongly agree. So you see that there's a certain you are following. So here I gave an example where if somebody was asked whether he loves the husband, and then people could reply not at all, a little bit, somehow, a lot, or agree. So you see that there's a certain order in which the answers appear. So for some items that we may be investigating, the rankings could be in an ordinal, that they have to appear in a certain order. And that is what is commonly used in our research, that we use a Likert scale, whether it is because we have a 3-point Likert scale, we have a 4-point, we have a 5-point, which is commonly used, we have a 6-point, others use a 7-point, which is highly recommended, then 9, 8, 10, and then 11. I've seen up to 11. I haven't seen the rest, but I've seen others using a Likert scale up to 11. The anchoring will depend on what you want. You want to the responses to be. Like for me, in my PhD, I used a 7 Likert scale. On my master's, I used a 5-point, which had strongly agree, neutral, disagree, and then strongly disagree. That is what I used. So that is an ordinal scale. And those variables that use an ordinal scale could be taken to be ordinal variables. That they have a certain order in which they have to be ranked. So that is with the categorical variables. For us, our major focus is on the nominal, and of course the dichotomous happens because we normally basically look for gender. Every time we do research, we look for the gender of the research participants or the respondents, and then the ordinal. So we find that these 3 for the categorical variables, these 3 always surface. The nominal surfaces, and then also the dichotomous and the ordinal. But in the SPSS, we have nominal and ordinal, and in addition to numeric. And then with the continuous, you're going to find that, yes, we have not much business here, but just for you to know that You have the categorical variables, and then you have the continuous variables that could take on any value within a different range. So you're going to find that some of these values could be infinite, or others could be finite. And then for the continuous variables, examples we have the interval variables, and a good example is the variable for temperature, where its values will be measured along a continuum. That we have the thermometer and the temperature is being measured along that continuum. So those variables that could be measured along a continuum and carry a numerical value are interval variables. So for us in social research, our interest is in the categorical variables. Unless you're doing a longitudinal, if you're using panel data, because I've seen students who have studied temperature, the influence of temperature, rain on something like climate change, something. At least I've examined the student who has done that kind of research. But they've used panel data. And then we have the racial variables, which also hold numerical values. And for them, we see that they could be measured quantitatively, whereby these variables or the values may have equal distances between them. And here we have maybe if you take intervals of maybe 10, they could be, the equal distances could be of 10. To move 10, 20, the distances have to be the same across all the line when you're lining up the different values for that variable. So for the racial variables, that is what we say, they're quantitatively measured, but their measurement involves equal distances between values. You can't say that you move from 10 to 40 or from 40 to 90. No, the distance has to be the same across. And then for discrete, still these hold numerical values. And we've said for them, they use distinct whole numbers, 1, 2, 3. So the intervals between them are very clear. And with discrete variables, the use of decimal places is not recommended. But for the continuous variables, maybe if somebody is using longitudinal data, that is when you go in for them. For social research, where we use ordinal, for social research, we mainly use ordinal variables, and then the dichotomous is very common, and then we have also the nominal. The nominal variables, because there are those variables we have in our questionnaire that may not be arranged in a particular order. And I've said marital status is one of them, very common. But with the continuous, yes, you need to know that they are there. But you may come across when you go for this other kind of research, the research that requires the use of panel data, and also if you're somebody specifically studying certain variables like what? Like rain and temperature. Because that is where you may get these variables. But these others, getting, say, electricity consumption, no, it is normal data. Because I've also seen that. Electricity access, normal data. Maximum electricity demand, normal data. Normal data. So those are the other ways you could look at the variables. Here, this one takes us to our questionnaire. We need to have these variables. And when we are entering data in SPSS, we should be able to identify which is a nominal variable which is dichotomous and which is an ordinal. But like I've said, normally in Excel we have numeric, nominal, and ordinal. Those are the three categories we have in Excel. So any questions on what I've so far said? Any questions? Because I want to go slowly by slowly such that we understand. And then we are going to implement after. We are going to implement. Any questions? So we should be able to identify which ones are ordinal. But I've already told you because we're going to use a Likert scale. So with the ordinal, you can ask even yourselves. Maybe you can say, our course leader is very good. Agree, strongly agree, neutral, disagree, and then strongly disagree. That is already an ordinal scale. So anchoring the answers in a certain order, maybe that you may want. But with that ordinary, of course, at times you have to justify why you're using a certain kind of anchoring. You have to justify. That is why in most cases, supervisors will ask you, like when I was doing green supply chain performance, my supervisor asked me to present articles of scholars that had used and examined green supply chain performance but using a 7-point Likert scale. Because I had decided to use a 7-point Likert scale. And when you decide to use a certain anchoring, say 5-point or 3-point, that means that all your variables should use the same level of anchoring. You can't use, say, on your independent, a 5-point Likert scale. Then on your one dependent you use 5-point Likert scale. On another dependent you use a 7-point Likert scale. And maybe on your dependent you use a 11-point Likert scale. If you say I'm going to use a 5-point Likert scale, it has to be consistent throughout. You shouldn't say for this variable I'm using this. For this other variable I'm using this. And you have to produce justification why you're using that. And you use earlier scholars. Like these scholars have used maybe, say for example, a 5-point Likert scale when examining this same what? Any questions so far? Any questions? Any difficulties you're obtaining? So should I assume that now everything is well so far?
So far so good for me.
So, but like I said, I want you to identify the context and then your dependent variable and then the problem. It should be a local problem. If it's in campus, of course, you'll have to decide whether you're studying farms, depending on the company. If it's your dependent is a farm level variable, you may choose your unit of analysis to be a farm, meaning you're going to study farms. Though, if you're determining variables, you're two independents and you're dependent. If the dependent is a farm level, then why not these others to be also done at the farm level? So we shall look at that when you present the variables. Because there are times when you have a mixture. You have individual level and farm level. Then when it comes to measurement, it gets hard to measure. And that is where questions come from. Then you have, because somebody can ask you, how did you handle those things? We have, at one point, we have farm level, and then in some of other variables, we have individual level. Maybe one of the independence is an individual level. Maybe it could be employers' attitudes. That is an individual level variable. In most cases, attitudes are individual level, unless you generate or you evidence of an article where that variable you want to study has been done on at a farm level. Like for me, I studied entrepreneurial orientation, but when you go to entrepreneurial studies, entrepreneurial orientation has been examined as an individual level variable and at the same time as a farm level variable. So I gave my justification of saying entrepreneurial as the scholars who had examined something related to entrepreneurial orientation at the farm level. So for any things that could bring contradictions, you have to justify. Yes, Babidi?
Good evening. Yes, good evening, Prof. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, so my question is about the skills that you're talking about. I'm not understanding those skills that you're talking about.
When you reach the time of drafting the questionnaire, you're going to get the skills, and also that is why I said when you identify the variables, normally we say we adopt measurement items. Those statements you're going to put in your questionnaire to collect that, adopt them. Then, normally you have to look at, when you're going to adopt, you have to get an article. You use some scholars' measurement items. So when you go to that article, you will see how, you will have to look at how did this scholar measure these items. So when you find that methodological section under measurement of items, they will tell you that the items, even they provide a justification. So when it comes to the questionnaire, you'll have to show. We're going to see these things when practically, when we begin designing those questionnaires, because they will ask you for those Likert skills and the measurements. But I've already said for each variable, the measurements will be adopted from the measures that the earlier researchers have done. So you have to quote the source for your measures. Maybe if it's information sharing, you have to look at a person, look out for a scholar who has studied information sharing. And then that person's article should have measures. That is, it should have statements that can be put in the questionnaire. So the people, but they do not provide the measures. But we look out for those articles for scholars that have studied the variable we are examining, but have measures. Even if it's different context, we can tailor them to our context. So for the skills, you're going to study them, and we can get samples. I can show you samples of what I'm saying. You will get them. So here we are just saying we are beginning, because personally I saw when people reach analyzing data, they normally in SPSS they will say, is it an ordinal variable, is it a nominal, or is it numeric? You have to choose, because what you choose may also guide on how the software behaves. So even us during masters, nobody told us those things. But now I realize them after that ordinal, these variables are ordinal because of ABC. And these are numeric, and these are nominal. Because we deal more with the nominal and ordinal variables in our. But you'll see now, just let what I'm saying sink in your brain, and then practically we are going to see it. Because when we get these sample articles published, we shall look at each and everything, and then I'll show you this is what we meant here, this is what we meant here. This is what we meant here. And then dissertations, you'll see the questionnaires or the sample proposals. You can share them and tell you this is what we meant here. Such that when you're doing, you do exactly what you want, you understand. Any other questions? Babi, do you still have a question?
No, Prof. You've asked me. Thank you so much.
So we have we go now to academic writing, because now what I wanted to communicate is done. That what is academic writing? Because that is the song for all academicians, but a problem to many academicians, that most people don't know how to write academically. Even on PhDs, you could get somebody's piece of work when their kind of writing is really not okay. They are just describing situations instead of creating debates, arguments, and then some are proposing certain ideas that could work. Because we can't just say yes, yes throughout, and we can't just keep on citing. But when we read, if we find there are differences in supply chain performance across companies, then we have to analyze why is the difference there. Could the difference be because the research was done in different industries? Could the difference be because the research was done in different countries? What is the level of development in these countries? And then afterwards, you present the differences in performance and you give a reason as to why you think the difference exists. But you can't just write just simply telling us this